When Mama Ruth walked into my counseling room, she moved slowly, not because her body was weak, but because her heart carried years. Her scarf sat neatly on her head, and her hands trembled softly as she rested them on her lap. "Amara," she whispered, "some wounds don't bleed on the skin. They bleed in the soul." I leaned forward. "Tell me, Mama, I'm here." She closed her eyes as if stepping back in time. It began the day my son came home. Hello, beloved. Welcome again to Unbroken Courage. I'm Amara. Tonight's story is not about a battlefield far away, but the battlefield a soldier faced when he returned home. Stay till the end, dear one, because this story will remind you. Sometimes the fiercest war is not fought with bullets, but with heartbreak. Her son, Daniel, had enlisted straight out of school. A brave boy, she said. His heart was never loud, just steady. He believed in protecting others. They weren't wealthy, but Daniel was rich in kindness. Every morning before leaving for training, he kissed my hands, Mama Ruth recalled. He told me, "Mama, I will make you proud." And oh, I was proud. She chuckled softly, a fragile laugh wrapped in memory. He married young, a beautiful woman named Sarah who laughed like bells and held Daniel's arm as if she could never let go. They were in love, Amara, she said slowly, or so I believed. Time passed, and war came. And like many sons of this soil, Daniel answered the call. He didn't go to fight for glory, Mama Ruth whispered. He went because he believed some people must stand when others can't. Then came the call. Mama Ruth's voice broke. I still remember that phone ringing. I still remember my knees shaking as I answered. Her son had been injured in combat, shrapnel, nerve damage. He survived by inches. When I saw him in that hospital bed, she paused, swallowing hard. I didn't see a soldier. I saw my baby boy who once cried because he scraped his knee. He held her hand and said, "Mama, I'm okay. God didn't let me die." His faith held him upright, his body not quite. They sent him home earlier than planned. A medical discharge, a wounded lion limping back to his den. He told me he didn't want to call Sarah, she said. He wanted to surprise her. Mama Ruth smiled bitterly. Oh, Amara, some surprises turn into storms. The day he returned was quiet and golden. He walked slow but proud, leaning on a cane, medals in his pocket, hope in his chest. He kept rehearsing what he would say, she said. "Sarah, my love, I'm home." He wanted to see her eyes light up. But when he opened the door, there was no laughter, no welcome, no scent of food or warmth, just emptiness. The living room was bare, the TV gone, the rug gone, cushions missing, plates, spoons, curtains, everything stripped like the inside of a forgotten house. He stood there frozen, Mama Ruth whispered, like his body had been wounded again. A single envelope lay on the kitchen counter. He picked it up. The paper shook in his hand, not from weakness but disbelief. Mama Ruth recited the words slowly, tears gathering. "You came back different. I cannot live with someone who is broken. I found someone who makes me feel alive. Don't look for me." He read it once, twice. Then he sat on the floor, medals still in his pocket. "That floor became his battlefield," she whispered. His heartbeat, I could feel it break from miles away. Mama Ruth arrived hours later. His cane lay beside him. His head rested against the wall. The man who faced bullets now sat defeated by silence. "He didn't cry loud," she said. "He cried like someone who didn't want the world to know it had won." That night, she stayed with him in that empty house. No furniture, no comfort, just a mother holding her son's shaking shoulders as he whispered, "Mama, I fought enemies out there. I never thought my enemy would be waiting at home." Days passed. Daniel barely spoke. He refused visitors. The strong soldier became a quiet shadow. "He didn't eat unless I begged," she said. "He didn't sleep unless exhaustion forced him." When people asked what happened, she simply said, "He came home to war." One evening, she found him staring at his wedding ring. "Mama," he asked softly, "what do you call a love that leaves when you break?" She held his face and whispered, "You call it a blessing in disguise. Anything that abandons you in pain was never yours in peace." He closed his eyes and leaned into her hands like a child again. And when Mama Ruth finished speaking, she looked at me with steady strength. "I didn't come today because we're healed," she said. "I came because healing has begun." She smiled, not in joy but in courage. He is still here, he is still breathing, and as long as he breathes, God is not finished. Beloved, a reminder, war may wound the body, betrayal wounds the soul, but a mother's prayers and God's grace, they rebuild warriors. If this touched you, say amen in the comments and tell me what part held your heart. I'm Amara, and this is Unbroken Courage, where pain meets purpose and broken wings learn to fly again. Mama Ruth came again the next week. She sat down gently, her hands folded, her face weary, not with defeat, but with the strength only mothers who pray through storms understand. Amara, she began, I always thought my son fought his greatest battle in uniform. I didn't know the real battle began when he took it off. Daniel's body had scars, but the deeper wounds were hidden, silent, sharp, buried inside. He woke up at night gasping, she said. He'd clutch his chest like the memories were bullets still lodged inside. Sometimes she found him sitting on the floor at dawn, staring at nothing, whispering, "Why am I still here?" Soldiers learn to fight enemies they can see. No one trains them for the ones that live in their minds. The neighbors whispered. People who once praised him now avoided him. Some called him the soldier who broke. Mama Ruth heard every whisper, but never answered. Some battles you fight by keeping your dignity. She cooked his favorite meals. She prayed over his room. She spoke life even when he wasn't listening. I would sit beside him, she said, and read Psalms aloud, not because he asked, but because even silence needs company. One evening, she asked him, "Son, talk to me." He shook his head slowly. "I don't know who I am without the uniform. I don't know who I am without her." Mama Ruth held his hand. "Pain is not identity," she whispered, "and abandonment is not your definition. God is still writing." He didn't answer, but he didn't pull his hand away either. Sometimes that is the first sign of hope. Weeks passed. Daniel forced himself to therapy, not because he believed in it, but because his mother insisted gently until he agreed. At first, he sat there in silence, she said. He thought admitting hurt meant weakness. But one day, during a session, something broke open. A question triggered it. A memory surfaced. A soldier cried, not because he was weak, but because he was still human. The therapist told him, Mama Ruth recalled, healing doesn't make you less of a man. Refusing to heal does. He didn't respond. But that night, he slept for 3 hours straight, the longest since he returned. Slowly, small changes appeared. Not miracles, steps. One morning, Daniel made his own breakfast. A week later, he walked to the gate without help. Then one afternoon, he asked his mother, "Mama, do you think God still sees me?" She smiled through tears. "My son, God never stopped." He nodded, his voice barely above a breath. "I want to try again. Try to live. Try to breathe again. Try to trust that his future wasn't buried in fire and betrayal." He joined a veterans support group. Men who knew the language of silence. Men who understood battles that don't show on skin. They didn't talk much at first, Mama Ruth said. Just shared presence. Sometimes healing begins when someone simply sits beside you and doesn't leave. One afternoon, he returned from the group and said quietly, "They prayed for me today." Mama Ruth's eyes glowed. That was the first day I saw my son stand straighter. Not healed yet, but rising. Still, pain visited. On quiet evenings, he'd sit outside and stare at the sunset, ring still on his finger, memories still fresh like open wounds. "I wanted to remove it," he told his mother once, "but I didn't know if removing the ring meant removing who I used to be." She didn't push him. Healing is never forced, it unfolds. One day, she found him with tears filling his eyes. "What is it, son?" He looked down at his hands. "I thought surviving the war was strength, but living after it, this is harder." Mama Ruth wiped his tears like he was a little boy again. "You lived through bullets," she whispered. "Now live through heartbreak. Both are battles, but only one leads you to purpose." He leaned against her shoulder and breathed slow. No words, just surrender. And then, beloved, I noticed it. The shift. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was gentle, like dawn. The soldier no longer looked like a broken man. He looked like a man learning himself all over again. He wasn't healed yet, but he was returning, not to the world, but to himself. When Mama Ruth finished this part of her story, she looked at me softly. "He didn't rise in one leap," she said. "He rose in breaths, in tiny victories, in silent prayers. God stitched him back one day at a time." I touched her hand. "And that is what courage looks like." She nodded. "Courage is sometimes getting up when you'd rather stay on the floor." Beloved, this story is a reminder. Not all warriors wear uniforms. Some wear scars the world cannot see. And sometimes the bravest thing a person does is keep breathing when their world has collapsed. Drop a comment if you feel this. And if you are walking through silent healing, you are not alone. I'm Amara, and this is Unbroken Courage, where wounded hearts learn to beat again. Mama Ruth returned one bright morning, walking a little faster, hope resting on her shoulders like sunlight. There was a softness in her steps, the kind you only see in someone who has witnessed a miracle unfold slowly, like a flower opening petal by petal. "Amara," she said, her voice trembling with quiet joy, "my son is standing again." Not physically. He had been walking for months. But his spirit had risen. The turning point didn't come with a loud moment. It came quietly, like dawn. One afternoon, Daniel walked into the kitchen and said, "Mama, I think I'm ready to forgive her." Mama Ruth froze. She looked at her son, the same man who once sat on the floor asking why life kept breathing through him when everything felt stolen. She didn't rush to respond. She only nodded and whispered, "Forgiveness does not excuse what she did. It releases what it left in you." Daniel nodded. "I don't want to carry her in my pain anymore." He sat on the porch that night. No anger, no shaking hands. Just a tired soul choosing rest over resentment. "The war outside ended long ago," he whispered to himself, "but the war inside ends today." He didn't call her. He didn't send a message. Forgiveness does not always ask for audience. Sometimes it only asks for release. He opened his palm and removed his ring, not throwing it, not breaking it. He placed it gently inside a box. "I honor who I was then," he murmured, "but I choose who I will be now." And when he closed the lid, something in his heart closed too, peacefully. Healing gave him new eyes. Pain had stripped him. Grace rebuilt him. He started volunteering at a veterans center, not because he felt fully ready, but because someone else needed the strength he had left. "Some days I still shake," he told Mama Ruth. "And that's okay," she answered. "Shaking still means you're trying to stand." He spoke to young men struggling with fear. He sat beside older soldiers who still dreamed in gunfire. He held hands of widows who never got to say goodbye. He didn't lecture. He listened. And in listening, he found himself again. Sometimes the most powerful warriors are the ones who do not roar. They whisper hope into wounded souls. Then came the day his ex-wife returned. It wasn't dramatic. No storm, no crowd, just a knock on the door. Gentle, hesitant, afraid. Mama Ruth opened the door and froze. Sarah stood there, face pale, hands shaking, humility replacing pride. Is he here?" she whispered. Daniel walked out slowly. Their eyes met, not as lovers, not as enemies, but as strangers who once lived in the same dream. She swallowed. "I heard you came home. I heard everything. Daniel, I'm so sorry. I didn't know how broken I was. I ran instead of staying. I failed you." Daniel's voice was calm, no bitterness, no desire to wound. "You didn't fail me," he said quietly. "You failed yourself." Her tears fell. "If there is any way, any chance that we could," he lifted a hand gently, stopping her. "Sarah," he said, "I already forgave you. Truly. You don't owe me anything." Hope flickered in her eyes. "But forgiveness," he continued, "doesn't always mean returning." Silence. Then understanding washed over her like rain. She nodded, breath shaking. "Thank you for not hating me," he gave a faint, genuine smile. "I don't hate you. I prayed for you." Sometimes victory doesn't sound like triumph. It sounds like peace. She left quietly, carrying closure in her trembling hands. Mama Ruth turned to her son, tears in her eyes. "You did it," she whispered. And he answered, "No, Mama, God carried me through it." Months later, at a charity event for injured soldiers, Daniel met someone. Her name was Maya, a physiotherapist. Gentle eyes, a laugh made of soft sunlight. She didn't ask him what broke him. She asked him what made him strong. And slowly, without rushing, without forcing, a new chapter began. Pain had been his teacher, grace became his companion, and love came back pure, healthy, patient. When Mama Ruth finished telling me everything, she placed her hand on her heart and said, "Amara, my son didn't come home to a house. He came home to a calling." I smiled. "Some homes are built after the fire," she nodded. "And sometimes betrayal is the doorway God uses to lead us to our true blessing." Beloved, that is the final chapter of The Son Who Came Home to an Empty House. A story that reminds us we do not always choose the battles we face, but we can choose who we become after them. Forgiveness is not weakness, it is the final victory. And when God rebuilds a life, He builds it stronger than before. If this touched you, tell me what part spoke to your heart. And share it with someone who feels abandoned, because some endings are really beginnings in disguise. I'm Amara, and this is Unbroken Courage, where broken hearts rise, not in spite of pain, but because of grace.